If an archaeologist doesn't understand something, they'll speak to another archaeologist. If they're still not sure what they're dealing with, they'll go to a scientist. If the scientists can't help them, they have a problem. The history of archaeology is littered with problems like these, and in many cases, scientists still haven't found all the answers, even after years of research. That's annoying for scientists, but it's great for us, because it means we can make fascinating videos like this one. The definition of an out-of-place artifact is an object that ought not to exist in the time or place in which it was found. The COSO artifact, discovered in California in 1961, is one of the best examples of this hard-to-explain phenomenon. If it were to be taken at face value, it would be evidence of time travel. At the core of the mystery is a spark plug from the 1920s, manufactured by a company called Champion. The spark plug is embedded within a hard iron oxide shell, and that's what causes the problem. Under laboratory conditions, the shell has been tested and proven to be 500,000 years old. There appears to be no way the spark plug could have been embedded inside the shell at a later date, because there's no point of entry, so the shell must have grown around it. That means the spark plug must have been in situ 500,000 years ago, which is of course impossible. Scientists think that porous minerals might have allowed the shell to grow from existing rock and engulf the 1920s artifact much faster than it appears to have been done. But that's a stretch. The true nature of the COSO artifact is unknown. When Henry Sant discovered the Cuddy temple in Malta in 1916, it would have counted as a significant archaeological discovery, even if there were nothing mysterious about it. The ruins of this 5,000-year-old structure offers us a rare glimpse into ancient Maltese life and culture. The limestone slab found at its center, though, holds far more wonder than the rest of the temple. Now known as the Cuddy stone, this appears to be a segment of a much larger circular slab, split into segments with unique stars and constellations in each segment. It would probably be fair to assume that it's a calendar of some kind, but to German academic Kai Helge Wirth, it's far more than that. He believes that, as well as showing the position of the stars, the Cuddy stone also charts the currents of the Mediterranean Ocean, and so it could have been used as a navigational aid for planning journeys across the sea. The idea of an advanced seafaring race existing 5,000 years ago might seem far-fetched, but we know the ancient Phoenicians were capable of extended sailing trips. Did this old broken slab help them to plan their routes? Stonehenge, the stone circle in Wiltshire, England, is one of Europe's most mysterious ancient monuments. Academics still debate how and why it was built today, and they're even more confused by its lesser-known neighbor, Woodhenge. The existence of this wooden circle wasn't noticed until it was seen and photographed from above in 1925. These aerial photographs revealed the presence of holes in the ground, arranged in a similar formation to the slabs that make up Stonehenge. Archaeologist Maud Cunnington tasked herself with investigating these holes and found traces of wooden posts in each of them. Cunnington identified 6 distinct rings, each of which featured a ditch and a mound at their center. Were these wooden rings, created about 4,400 years ago, practice runs for the more difficult task of creating Stonehenge? If so, it shows that Neolithic people in England had a much greater capability for design and planning than any historian has ever given them credit for. In more recent times, the ancient holes have been filled with stone columns to give tourists a better impression of how the site would originally have appeared, but greater visibility hasn't helped experts get any closer to solving the mystery. Travel by boat wouldn't have been an option for the average person in Egypt 5,000 years ago, but it seems it was an option for the pharaohs. In July 2012, French archaeologists discovered the remains of an ancient wooden boat in Abu Rawesh, not far from Cairo. Its age means that it may well have been made during the reign of Pharaoh Den, a king of ancient Egypt's first dynasty. All may not be as it seems, though. Archaeologists believe that these boats might have been intended to transport the pharaohs in the afterlife, rather than during their mortal existence. These vessels are known as solar boats, and at 20 feet long, This is one of the largest and best preserved ever to be found. Typically made from cedar wood, these boats would be buried close to the tombs of pharaohs in the belief that they would carry the deceased leaders across the heavens to meet Ra, the sun god. There's no evidence that they ever sailed across the water, but their design would have allowed them to float on the Nile. This is definitely a form of luxury transport for 5,000 years ago. But did any living soul ever sail on one? Nobody knows for sure. The Bayou Tapestry is an incredible piece of Middle Ages art and tells the story of the Battle of Hastings, which took place in England in 1066. It was the last time that England was ever successfully invaded by an enemy nation. It's considered to be a cultural icon in both England and France. But which side does it truly belong to? And who made it? Nobody knows for sure, but there are a few clues. One school of thought says that the tapestry is of French design and might have been commissioned for the dedication of Bayou Cathedral in 1077. Another says that it was made by embroiderers in England somewhere between 1067 and 1092. The first solid record of its existence, though, doesn't appear until it's recorded in the inventory of Bayou Cathedral in Normandy, France, in 1476. That might point to it being French, but the content of the tapestry includes the stories of 3 English kings: Edward the Confessor, King Harold, and King William. Had it been made by the French, it would surely have focused more on the French side of the battle than the English side. On the other hand, though, its proportions are a perfect fit for the nave of Bayou Cathedral, which suggests it was specifically made to fit there. It's probably French, but we can't be certain. Moving across Europe to Naples in Italy, we find the catacombs of San Gennaro. This underground burial site, which is thought to be of Paleo-Christian origin, is notable for being a burial site made of other burial sites. The remains of numerous other cemeteries and basilicas are now contained within this labyrinthine structure. They're similar in design to the more famous catacombs in Rome, and get older the deeper you go. The lowest level was built in either the 3rd or 4th century, and might even be built on top of yet another ancient cemetery dating back to the country's pre-Christian era. Although it was clearly a busy burial site, it isn't thought to have become particularly important until it was consecrated to Saint Generius in the 5th century, an occasion marked by the internment of his remains at the site. They were later moved to the Cathedral of Naples. Any possibility of discovering precise data about the history of the catacombs was destroyed between the 13th and 18th centuries, when they were repeatedly looted, eventually necessitating the removal of all skeletal remains to avoid the risk of further desecration. They're still well known today for their beautiful frescoes, but we wish we knew the reason why this was considered such a prestigious and sacred burial space between the 5th and 10th centuries. Elsewhere in Italy is the Etruscan pyramid of Bomarzo. We're not entirely sure how it got its name. It's not much of a pyramid. It would be more accurate to call it a giant stone-stepped altar rising out of the forest. Even though it's a stone's throw from the Parco di Mostri, this significant structure somehow evaded the attention of archaeologists and historians until the 1990s. Nobody knows the full history of the site, but the prevailing theory is that it was built around 2,700 years ago by and for the Etruscan haruspices. They were soothsayers who claimed to be able to see the future by examining the entrails of animals that were sacrificed on the altar for that express purpose. That idea is backed up by the fact that the altar faces northwest, in the direction of the underworld gods that the Etruscans are known to have believed in. Following this theory along, the gutters carved into the stone would have dealt with the blood from the sacrificed animals, and the holes might have once featured wooden poles or other wooden structures. This is an impressive patchwork of guesses, but without any solid evidence to verify it, we can't conclude that any of it is factual. Let's stay in Italy a little longer and head to Gricignano in Campania. There, in the shadows of Mount Vesuvius, we'll find a U.S. military base. Beneath that base, we'll find a collection of ancient villages and tombs of uncertain origin. Most of the ruins and remnants were found during the creation of the American Naval Support Site during the 1990s, when digging work unearthed 4,000 years' worth of local history. While the eruption of Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii in the year 79, it's thought that these villages and their residents perished in a much larger eruption event around 1,700 years earlier. This event, known as the Pompici di Avellini eruption, was so enormous that it deposited several feet of ash over an area covering almost 20 miles, giving the people living close to the volcano no chance of survival whatsoever. The multiple ancient footprints that can be seen at the site demonstrate that many of the villagers tried to run, but it's doubtful that they got very far. There's also a small Bronze Age village at the site, as well as a necropolis that might be up to 7,000 years old. We know that Romans lived here during the Imperial Age, but the identities of these older residents will forever remain a mystery. Almost everyone is familiar with the Atlantis myth, the tale of a mighty ancient city that was lost to the waves thousands of years ago and then disappeared from history. Many places around the world have been suggested as possibilities for the truth behind the myth. Perhaps the lost city of Heraklion in Egypt is the strongest contender. For many years, it was itself thought to be a myth, known only through the occasional inscription or mention in ancient texts. Then, in the year 2000, a team led by French archaeologist Franck Godiot finally found it in the waters of Abu Qir Bay off the coast of Alexandria. This city, now entirely underwater, is enormous and must have been a sight to behold in ancient times. Godiot's team recorded and photographed more than 60 ships, piles of gold coins, statues standing more than 15 feet high, and a colossal temple dedicated to Amun-Gareb. The favorable underwater conditions have afforded these 2,300-year-old ruins an excellent state of preservation, right down to the remains of the canals that once crossed the city. This was the Egyptian answer to Venice, and nobody has any idea how or why it ended up beneath the waves. The most popular idea is also the most basic. The city simply became too heavy for the land it was built on. The city of Kanos in Turkey has been conquered and captured multiple times during its 2,500-year history. Each time it's happened, the city's new rulers have attempted to erase the legacy of their predecessors. That's resulted in the loss of a lot of archaeological evidence and knowledge, and made it impossible to determine who built the city's beautiful rock-cut tombs. They appear to be Hellenic in design and are probably around 2,200 years old. After being built, what little archaeological evidence can be obtained from them suggests that they remained in use until around 500 years ago. It remains possible that they're up to 300 years older than the most popular estimate, which would mean they were carved at or around the same time that Kanos was founded. Unlike most ancient tombs, there's no separation here between rich and poor. It's thought that the 20 or so of the 150 tombs that have elaborate entrance decorations and carvings probably belonged to leaders or aristocrats, but the remainder are plain and appear to have belonged to everyday people. We'll never know which artists to thank for these spectacular works of sculpture and carving. Scientists and archaeologists don't have a shortage of material to work with when it comes to the plane of jars. There are dozens of examples of the jars strewn all over the highlands of Laos, with an especially high density in the Jiangkuang Plain. All are of similar design, carved out of solid rock, and ranging in height between 3 and 10 feet. Providing precise ages for rock monuments is never easy, but they're most likely between 2 and 2,500 years old. As the largest of them weighs 10 tons, it's hard to imagine how the people of that era managed to move them into their current positions. Various theories have been posited about the purpose of the jars, but the most popular of them at the moment is that they were used as temporary burial spaces. The idea is that the dead would be placed inside the jars until the decomposition process was complete, after which they'd be brought back out again and then buried with their possessions in a more permanent grave. Many pieces of ancient jewelry and clothing have been found in the vicinity of the jars, along with several stone tablets. But the lack of any bodies to go with the personal possessions means this theory has to go down as a maybe. Our next mystery isn't anything like as old as the jars on the Plain of Jars, but it's no less of an enigma. It's the Shell Grotto in Margate, England, and it was found quite by accident by a farmer digging on his land with a shovel in 1835. He unwittingly broke through the roof of the grotto, and after realizing there was something lurking beneath his field, he climbed down to find a 2,000 square foot building hiding in the dark, with its walls covered in mosaics made from more than 4 million individual shells. It's an almost incomprehensible work of art and construction, and its origins are entirely unknown. The shells are all from the Margate area, but the design inspiration seems to have been taken from either the Middle East or ancient Greece. The farmer turned his discovery into a tourist attraction by charging people for entry, but the horde of visitors trampling through the grotto with gas lamps leaving soot on the ceilings destroyed a lot of the archaeological evidence and made radiocarbon dating impossible. It might be a 19th century gentleman's club, or it could be something far older. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!